Alright, so next up we will tackle the blue. And of course red counters blue, so we will mix some black red and flat black. Excuse the color palette here, it got kind of dark. It was shadowed out by the other camera that's filming the color palette. But the paint should still be red when mixing this. It should not be, as it looks here, black. So you still want red hue in there, but the black helps just bringing it down a little bit. Because you still want it to counter the blue fairly well. But same as for the white here, we are going to panel out all the recessed areas with this paint. And use glazes and water in this to get a more fluent effect of it running down in the recessed areas. I found over the time that I think I said this before, but I say it again, that the glaze medium from Vallejo makes a huge impact when shading recessed areas with these types of paint. It just helps the paint bleed into the recessed areas much easier. So it's a real big helper, and it's more simple than using oil paints, because you have to use gloss varnishes before you use the old paints, and you have to use the spirits to mix into the old paints, and it's quite messy. So just grabbing that glaze medium and mixing into your paint and let it bleed, that procedure instead it just saves you time and effort. I mean, it's just a grab. So as you can see, some areas I block out with a huge chunk of paint, like the sides of the backpack here I did previously. That is just to block out some areas that I don't think light hits very well, and sometimes I do that because I'm not interested in painting those areas, and I don't think they will show up when the miniature is finished. So therefore I just put down a huge shaded area there and let it be an effect instead. And I'm just gonna shade the trim a little bit and nothing more onto the shoulder pads. And as mentioned in the airbrush tutorial earlier, I was going to paint the knee pads by hand. So I got some royal blue here, and I'm going to add some water to this so it gets really thin, because the blue is heavy with pigment, as mentioned in the airbrush tutorial as well. So I need to push the paint around and slowly build up a sketch of where I want the light to start hitting the knee pads. And then I will proceed to make a more even layer with this and a better transition to get a more opaque coverage at the middle and a translucent transition onto the sides of the spot where I want the light to hit. So slowly working with the brush here to obtain that result. So next up I'm going to use some Andrea Blue to finish off the knee pads with the brighter highlighting color that I used when airbrushed earlier as well. So just thinning this down with water as well and making a small sketch before thinning it out and making a smoother transition onto the middle here as well, just as we did with the royal blue but with a less paint coverage. So I'm also starting to paint out some of the more highlighted areas with the Andrea Blue as well. And since we used Andrea Blue with the airbrush, the randomly splashed out spots that I painted is blending in more to the armor more efficiently, as they are the same color. So this is just to make the color more opaque and will serve as a good pre-highlight, or not a pre-highlight but a good base for the future highlight that I'm going to paint down there, and also give a more natural feeling when the brush strokes are a bit more random there as well. So I'm going to proceed to just highlight all the areas with Andrea Blue to frame in all that detail and combine all the blues together, and keep preparing those brighter areas with the Andrea Blue. You can see on the backpack here that I bring up the light a lot more when applying solid coverage of the Andrea Blue onto the spots where I want the light to hit the most. Just gives a nicer feeling to the blue overall. You could leave the blue like this as well. You don't have to proceed to the next step that I will show soon. This will work perfectly fine as a blue for many of the Space Marines out there. Now we're gonna add some ice yellow to our Andrea blue, and I will use a very tiny amount of Andrea blue to the ice yellow, since blue is such a strong paint, so it will take hold of the ice yellow quite easily. So therefore you can see I'm using barely any blue at all to obtain my final mix of color for our highlights here. So yellow, of course, is a good counter to blue when doing these types of highlights, and it's a more natural feeling that the lights that's coming on to the Space Marine is a bit more yellow. I know that doesn't make sense with his white armor, so not entirely logical here. But you can see how the base highlights that we did with the Andrea blue before is really coming handy here when painting out those last highlighted light dots here. And we paint them out as a sort of a stream running down the side of the pad. This gives it a more crisper and nicer feeling to the model overall. So I really like this style of painting out the light dots. Before I usually just made a round circle and a small dot in the center of that circle, but this way just gives a more funnier experience when painting, a more fun experience when painting. So we got some nice blue going on here, and also highlighting the edge highlights a little bit more as well, just to lift them up. And adding a solid last dot of paint to the knee pads as well just gives them that extra lift up that we're looking for. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the backpack here. I'm going to highlight some of the edge highlights, and I am going to build up those areas that I covered with Andrea blue earlier and give them a little bit of a spark towards the brighter areas. So you might have noticed by now that I am continuing to building up that stream of light I airbrushed in the beginning at the 45-degree angle from the backpack. And this just gives a metallic sheen to the blue armor, and just a nice finish overall to it. And it's important to keep a straight line here with the paint, so you don't get any irregularities, because this is a very smooth and curved surface. So if you get any irregularities, those will be easily noticed. But of course, if they aren't too big, they might pass. So just sketching out the brighter blue paint here, or the brighter greenish blue paint I should actually say, and then making final solid light dots with the same paint onto some of the areas just to reflect the light. And at the top of some of the edge highlights. I also apply it to show that the light bounces downwards onto each sharp area that is pointed upwards. So here's the final result of the blue, and I hope you guys enjoyed these tutorials, and I will see you in the next ones. Really like the sheen that we got from the blue here. Alright, bye bye.